There's a moment in every person's life where they realize they've been asleep. Not literally asleep, but domesticated, weakened, turned into something safe and small by a world that rewards compliance and punishes ambition. And the worst part? You didn't even notice it happening. You woke up one morning and looked in the mirror. Same face, same life, same compromises. The dreams you had when you were younger, they didn't die. You just abandoned them. You told yourself it was practical, responsible, mature. But the truth is far colder than that. You simply became afraid, and fear made you soft. Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this. How many times this week did you hold your tongue when you should have spoken? How many opportunities did you let walk past because you were waiting for permission? How many relationships did you stay in that were actively poisoning you because leaving felt uncomfortable? You can pretend it's fine. You can tell yourself that you're being patient, that timing will work out, that everything happens for a reason. But deep down, you know the truth. You've been played, and not by anyone else, by yourself. This softness you carry, this need to be liked, to be seen as good, to avoid conflict at all costs, it's cost you everything, your potential, your respect, your power. Every single day you're watching people with half your intelligence, half your work ethic move past you because they understood one fundamental truth that you didn't. They understood that the world does not reward the meek, it devours them. Machiavelli said this centuries ago, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Not because he was cruel, but because he understood human nature in a way that most people refuse to acknowledge. Fear commands respect. Fear preserves your boundaries. Fear keeps predators at a distance. Love makes you vulnerable. Love makes you predictable. Love makes you exploitable. So here's where we start. We stop, we pause, and we admit the cold truth. You've been weak, indecisive, soft, and that softness has cost you everything. Not everything material, though it's probably cost you plenty of that, but it's cost you something far more valuable. It's cost you your own respect. The version of you that you could have become, the power you could have wielded, the control you could have had. It's all been sitting there, waiting for you to claim it. You won't claim it until you stop pretending that you're happy with where you are, until you stop making excuses, until you look directly into the mirror and admit that you've been your own greatest obstacle. Type one thing into the comments right now. One thing you've waited on too long. One decision you've been afraid to make. One boundary you haven't set. One person you haven't cut out. One dream you haven't pursued. Say it aloud. Not to me, to yourself. Because admitting what you've been avoiding is the first step toward actually changing it. The people who win in life understand something fundamental that separates them from everyone else. They move first. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait for the perfect moment. They don't wait to feel ready, because ready is something you create through action, not something you receive as a gift. Most people live in a perpetual state of waiting. They're waiting for the economy to be better, for the market to shift, for someone to hand them an opportunity, for their competition to get tired, for their enemy to slip up, for the stars to align. And while they're waiting, they're losing time, they're losing momentum, they're losing the psychological advantage that belongs to whoever moves first. Here's what most people don't understand about initiative. It's not just about timing. When you move first, you don't just secure a tactical advantage, you secure a psychological one. You control the narrative. You control the tempo. You force everyone else to react to you instead of the other way around. Your opponent is now playing defense. They're now on your clock. They're now operating from a position of disadvantage because you've already determined the rules. Think about it this way. In any conflict, whether it's business, relationships, or personal development, the person who moves first gets to define what the conflict is about. They get to choose the battlefield. They get to set the terms. Everyone else is just scrambling to catch up, which means they're already behind. They're already in a reactive state of mind. And a reactive mind is a controlled mind. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote, "The disorders which brought the Republic to ruin did not arise until the later ages of the city." What he meant was this: Decay doesn't announce itself. It creeps in slowly. It compounds. It's the result of 1,000 small failures to act when action was required. Every moment you don't move, you're not just staying still. You're falling backward. Your competition isn't standing still. Your circumstances aren't standing still. The market isn't standing still. So either you're moving forward or you're getting left behind. There is no middle ground. The most successful people in the world have a different relationship with action than everyone else. They understand that imperfect action beats perfect planning every single time. They move at 60% certainty instead of waiting for 90%. They'd rather make a mistake and learn from it than never move at all. And here's the brutal honesty. They're right. The person who makes 10 mistakes and learns from them is infinitely more powerful than the person who makes 0 mistakes because they never tried. This leads directly to how you integrate this into your life. You become someone who acts, not recklessly, not thoughtlessly, but decisively. You make a decision, and you move on it immediately. You don't sit with it for weeks. You don't workshop it with 10 different people. You evaluate it quickly, you make your call, and you move. The speed of your decision-making becomes a competitive advantage. Here's the deeper truth that most people never grasp. Every single day that you don't move on to something you know you should move on to, you're actually conditioning yourself to be weaker. You're building a habit of hesitation. You're strengthening the neural pathways of procrastination. You're literally making it harder for yourself to act in the future. Because inaction is a habit just like action is a habit, and habits compound. So you need to start immediately. Not tomorrow, not Monday, not next month. Today, find one thing. One decision you've been sitting on, one conversation you've been avoiding, one step you've known you need to take, and move on it right now. Let yourself feel the friction, let yourself feel the fear, and do it anyway. Because every single time you act despite the fear, you're rewiring yourself. You're building a new identity. You're becoming the kind of person who doesn't hesitate. This is the law of initiation. It's not complicated. It's brutal in its simplicity. You move first. You control the psychological advantage. You force the world to react to you. And as you make this a habit, you'll notice something shift. The world stops being a threat. It becomes a playground. People stop controlling you. You start controlling them. Not through malice, but through the simple fact that you understand something they don't, that speed and decisiveness are the rarest currencies in a world full of hesitators. But moving first isn't enough. Here's what separates the winners from the people who just move a lot and accomplish nothing. The winners understand that balance is a killer. They understand that comfort is the enemy of growth. And they understand that the only way to force real transformation is to shatter the illusions that keep you trapped. Most people live in a carefully constructed bubble. They've built a life that makes sense. It's predictable. It's safe. Nothing's too good. Nothing's too bad. They have their routines, their comfortable relationships, their familiar patterns. And they mistake this stability for success. They mistake equilibrium for strength. But here's the cold truth. Balance is mediocrity's mask. Think about it. An athlete doesn't get stronger by maintaining balance between effort and rest. They get stronger by creating an imbalance, by pushing beyond what feels comfortable, then recovering, then pushing again. An artist doesn't create masterpieces by staying in their comfort zone. They create by becoming obsessed, by losing sleep, by sacrificing a balanced life. Every single transformation in human history came from someone willing to destroy their equilibrium, to create chaos, to embrace the discomfort that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The people you admire, the ones who are genuinely powerful, genuinely wealthy, genuinely respected, didn't get there by maintaining balance. They got there by ruthlessly disrupting their own lives. They cut people out. They quit their jobs. They moved to new cities. They said no to good opportunities to make room for exceptional ones. They were willing to look crazy for a few years so they could look genius for the rest of their lives. And here's what's fascinating about this. Most people understand this intellectually. They know that disruption is necessary, but they don't do it because it feels bad. It feels wrong. It creates anxiety and uncertainty. And so they stay balanced. They stay mediocre. They stay trapped in a life that's slowly suffocating them because at least it doesn't feel actively dangerous. But manufactured disruption, intentional chaos, that's different. That's a tool. When you deliberately create instability in your life, you're forcing something crucial to happen. You're forcing growth. You're forcing yourself to adapt. You're forcing yourself to reveal what you're actually made of. Because it's easy to feel strong when everything's stable. It's easy to pretend you're ambitious when nothing's being asked of you. But the moment you pull the rug out from under yourself, the moment you create real stakes, that's when you find out if you're actually willing to win. Here's what this looks like practically. Maybe you need to destroy your social circle. You're surrounded by people who are comfortable with mediocrity, and their comfort is becoming your comfort. Cut them out. Not cruelly, just clearly. Stop accepting their invitations. Stop returning their calls. Stop letting their smallness become your ceiling. It will feel lonely for a while. It will feel harsh. Do it anyway. Maybe you need to demolish your schedule. You're so balanced between work and rest that you're actually doing neither well. Start working differently. Create intense periods of focus, then actual rest, not the zombie hours you spend scrolling. But break the routine that's lulling you into complacency. Maybe you need to burn down your financial stability. You've got enough saved up to live comfortably for a year. Most people use that as a safety net. Use it as a catalyst instead. Quit your job. Start something real. Put yourself in a position where you actually have to perform, where there's real hunger, where mediocrity isn't an option. The hunger that comes from genuine stakes will change you more than a decade of comfortable self-improvement. Machiavelli understood that princes who inherited power and never faced real adversity were the most fragile. They had no calluses. They had no hunger. They fell apart the moment real pressure arrived. But princes who'd fought for their position, who'd faced genuine threats, who'd been forced to adapt, those were the dangerous ones. They were hardened. They understood what was actually at stake. So you need to manufacture that same adversity for yourself. You need to deliberately create disruption. You need to pull yourself out of equilibrium hard enough that real growth becomes the only option. Break the comfortable patterns. Cut the comfortable relationships. Abandon the balanced approach. Create chaos, and then watch what emerges from that chaos. Watch how much stronger you become. Watch how much sharper your mind gets. Watch how real hunger reveals capabilities you didn't even know you had. This is the hardest part for most people because it feels wrong. It flies in the face of everything society tells you. But that's exactly why it works. Society is designed to make you comfortable and controllable. Real power comes from being willing to do what everyone else is too afraid to do. Now here's where most people get it wrong. They think power is loud. They think it's flashy. They think it's about dominating every room you walk into and making sure everyone knows how strong you are. But that's not power. That's insecurity dressed up as confidence. Real power is quiet. Real power is control. The moment you understand how to control the emotional temperature of a room, you understand how to control the people in it. And this is where most ambitious people completely miss the mark. They're so focused on looking powerful that they actually give away all their power. Think about the most intimidating people you've ever encountered. Were they the ones shouting? Were they the ones trying to convince you of how impressive they were? No. They were the ones who were completely comfortable with silence. They were the ones whose presence alone could shift the energy in a room. They were the ones who moved slowly, spoke deliberately, and never felt the need to fill space. That's power. That's the unshakable anchor that bends everyone else to its will. Here's the practical psychology of it. Human beings are desperately uncomfortable with silence. It triggers anxiety. It creates pressure. So when you're in a conversation and someone goes quiet, the instinct of most people is to fill that silence. They start talking. They start qualifying. They start defending. They start revealing. And the person who knows how to sit in that silence just watches themselves destruct. This is one of the oldest negotiation tactics in the world. The best deal makers don't dominate the room. They ask a question, listen to the answer, and then go silent. They let the other person sit in that uncomfortable space. And inevitably, the other person cracks. They start talking again. They reveal more. They negotiate against themselves. And the silent person ends up with exactly what they wanted. But it goes deeper than negotiation. It's about presence. The most powerful people in the world have an unusual relationship with their own attention. They're fully present, not in a spiritual, flowery way, but in a predatory way. They're like a predator that's still but completely alert. And that quality of attention is absolutely terrifying to most people, because most people are never fully present. They're distracted, fragmented, thinking about 3 other things. So when they encounter someone who is completely, totally present, they feel it immediately. The pace at which you move affects this too. Most people move fast because they're anxious and reactive. They're trying to escape the discomfort of stillness, so they stay busy, they stay distracted. But powerful people have a different relationship with pace. They move slowly when it matters. They speak slowly when there's something to say. They let things breathe. And this slowness, this deliberation, communicates something crucial, that they're not desperate, they're not needy, they're not trying to convince you of anything. They're just moving at their own pace, and the world can either keep up or get left behind. This becomes your emotional climate control. You're not trying to make people like you or feel comfortable, you're trying to make them feel the presence of something larger than themselves. And you do that through control. Control of your voice, control of your pace, control of your expressions, control of what you reveal and what you keep hidden, control of when you speak and when you stay silent. The people who master this become anchors. They walk into chaotic situations, and the chaos settles. Not because they're doing anything actively, they're just there, and things organize around them. They walk into tense conversations, and the tension dissipates. They walk into desperate environments, and suddenly things feel possible. That's what happens when you become emotionally unshakable. The world stops being something that moves you and starts being something you move. This is where most people fail. They think emotional control means suppressing who they are. But it's the opposite. It means knowing exactly who you are so completely that external circumstances don't shake that foundation. It means having your own internal baseline that's so solid that other people's emotions don't pull you off center. It means being so comfortable in your own skin that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. So how do you build this? You stop reacting. You observe before you respond. You stay calm when things get heated, specifically because staying calm is the most powerful response available. You listen more than you talk. You ask questions instead of defending. You let people sit in their own discomfort instead of rushing to rescue them. And slowly, over time, you develop a reputation. People start to see you as someone who can't be rattled, someone solid, someone safe to follow but dangerous to cross. That reputation, that presence, that unshakable quality, that becomes your power. You don't need to convince anyone of your strength. You demonstrate it through the simple fact that nothing shakes you, and the moment people realize you can't be moved, you've already won. They're already second-guessing themselves. They're already wondering if they should be taking you seriously. They're already beginning to bend to your will. But here's the problem that will destroy all of this if you're not careful. As you start to build real power, as you start to get real results, as people start to see you as someone serious, something else starts to happen. Comfort creeps back in. Success breeds complacency. The very thing that made you powerful, hunger, discipline, edge, starts to dull. This is the hardest part of sustained power. It's not maintaining it during the struggle. It's maintaining it after you've tasted success. Because success is the enemy of hunger. The moment you achieve something, your brain wants to enjoy it. Your body wants to relax. Your mind wants to coast. And if you allow that, you're finished. You're coasting toward mediocrity. You're on the first step toward being replayed. This is where starving your weakness becomes essential. And I mean that literally and figuratively. You need to identify every single comfort, every single person, every single habit that is eating your edge, and you need to remove it with ruthless consistency. Think about the people around you. Which ones make you softer? Which ones enable your worst impulses? Which ones drag you down into mediocrity with their own lack of ambition? Those people need to go, not because they're evil, not because they've done anything wrong, but because proximity is contagion. Their mediocrity will infect you if you let it. Their comfort will become your comfort. Their ceiling will become your ceiling. Now, I know what you're thinking. That feels harsh, that feels cold, and it is. But that's exactly why it works. The people who are genuinely winning aren't friends with the people who are losing. They're not, because friendship requires time and emotional energy, and they're not willing to spend either of those on relationships that don't serve their mission. It's not cruel, it's just priorities. This extends to habits too. What comfort are you currently using as a crutch? What habit is making you soft? Maybe it's the hours you spend on social media. Maybe it's the comfort food you eat when you're stressed. Maybe it's the sleep you're getting. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you're sleeping 12 hours a day, you're not sleeping because you're tired. You're escaping. Maybe it's the relationships, where you're the giver and they're the taker. Maybe it's the job that pays okay but kills your soul. All of these are eating your edge. All of them are slowly poisoning you. And the solution is simple, even if it's not easy. You cut them out. Not eventually. Not when you've eased into something better. Now, cold turkey, you eliminate the escape routes, you eliminate the fallback positions, you eliminate the comfort. Here's why this matters so much. The moment you remove your escape routes, something changes internally. Suddenly, you're not operating from a position of safety. You're operating from a position of necessity. And necessity breeds discipline in a way that almost nothing else can. When you know there's no plan B. When you know you can't retreat, when you know that failure isn't an option, that's when you perform at a level you didn't even know was possible. Machiavelli talked about this as well. The most powerful military leaders he studied weren't the ones with the most resources. They were the ones who burned their own retreat bridges. They landed their armies in enemy territory with no escape route, no way back to safety, and suddenly, the army was infinitely more dangerous because failure meant death. There was no option but to win, so they won. You need to do this to yourself, not with physical danger, but with your circumstances. Burn your safety net, commit fully to your path, remove the comfortable options, and watch what happens to your performance. Watch how sharp you become. Watch how strategic you become. Watch how resourceful you become when you know that coasting isn't an option anymore. But be specific about what you're cutting. Write down the 3 biggest comfort drains in your life right now. The 3 things that are eating your edge the most. Now commit to cutting them out this week. Not thinking about it, not planning a transition, actually doing it. Stop following the accounts that make you feel inadequate. Stop having conversations with people who drain you. Stop eating the foods that make you lethargic. Stop sleeping until 9 in the morning. Stop making excuses. What one comfort will you cut this week? Say it aloud, because saying it means you're committing to it. And commitment is the first step toward actually following through. As you build this new version of yourself, leaner, sharper, hungrier, something interesting starts to happen. People begin to notice. Your value starts to increase. Not because you're bragging about it or trying to convince them of it, but simply because you're becoming someone worth investing in. You're becoming someone whose time is actually valuable. And that's when you move into the most powerful position of all. That's when you make them need you. Most people spend their entire lives trying to need less, trying to be independent, trying to prove they don't need anyone. And that's correct. You shouldn't be desperate. You shouldn't be clinging to people. But what you should be doing is the opposite of what everyone else is doing. While everyone else is trying to make themselves indispensable by being available all the time, by saying yes to everything, by making themselves cheap and accessible, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to become rare. You're going to build something so valuable, so irreplaceable, so genuinely scarce that people will be fighting to access you instead of you fighting to access them. This is the art of scarcity, and it's the most fundamental principle of power. Think about it this way. What's more valuable? The guy who's always available, always answering calls, always saying yes to everything, or the selective guy, who's hard to get, who turns down opportunities, who's clearly doing something more important? Obviously, the second one. And it's not because he's actually doing anything different. It's because of the perception he's created through the practice of selective availability. Here's where most ambitious people get this wrong. They think power comes from giving more. They think they'll become indispensable by being the most helpful, the most available, the most giving. So they work 80 hours a week. They return every call within an hour. They say yes to every opportunity. And they wonder why they're not moving up. They wonder why people don't respect them more. They don't realize that they've actually given away all their power. Real power comes from creating scarcity. It comes from being so valuable that access to you is treated like a privilege. It comes from having such a clear focus and such clear boundaries that you can afford to say no to most things. It comes from the simple fact that you're not desperate for the opportunities. Opportunities are desperate for you. This requires two things simultaneously. First, you need to actually be valuable. You need to be genuinely good at something. You need to have a skill or expertise or a perspective that people actually want. This is where most people fail. They try to create artificial scarcity around something worthless. They make themselves hard to reach, but they have nothing worth reaching them for. That doesn't work. So first, you need to build genuine value. But second, you need to build the scarcity boundary. You need to make it clear that your time is limited, that access to you is limited, that you're not available to everyone who asks. The combination of genuine value and strategic unavailability is what creates the powerful position where people are now chasing you. This changes everything about how you operate. You're no longer the person who's trying to convince someone to hire you. You're the person who's selective about who gets to hire you. You're no longer the person who's trying to convince someone to be your friend. You're the person who's selective about who gets to be in your circle. You're no longer the person who's desperate to close the deal. You're the person the deal is desperate to close. And here's what's fascinating. This isn't arrogance. This is clarity. Arrogance is pretending to be more valuable than you are. Scarcity is simply not making yourself available to everyone. It's being honest about your limitations. It's having boundaries. And people respect boundaries. People fear scarcity. When someone has boundaries, when someone is selective, when someone doesn't seem desperate, people automatically value them more. So how do you build this? First, you establish clear boundaries. You decide what your time is worth. You decide who gets access to you and under what conditions. You stop trying to help everyone. You stop saying yes to every request. You start turning things down. And you do this not out of arrogance, but out of clarity about what you're actually trying to accomplish. Second, you become genuinely competent. You develop skills that matter. You build expertise that people value. You create something, a product, a service, a perspective, that's actually worth people's time. This is the unsexy part. This is the work part, but it's the foundation. Third, you leverage the gap between your actual value and how available you make yourself. If you're genuinely valuable, and you're also genuinely hard to access, the people who do get access value it more. The people who can't get access want it more. You've created a situation where supply is low and demand is high. That's when you have leverage. That's when you control the terms. That's when you stop chasing and start being chased. This shifts something fundamental about how you interact with the world. You're no longer operating from a place of need. You're operating from a place of abundance. And when you operate from abundance, your entire energy shifts. You're not desperate. You're not trying too hard. You're not making weak asks. You're making strong moves from a position of strength. And people can feel that difference immediately. It's also important to understand that this isn't about being rude or dismissive. It's about being clear. When you have boundaries, you can actually be more generous within those boundaries because you're not exhausted, you're not resentful, you're not overextended. So the time and energy you do give is genuine and focused. People know the difference between someone who's giving because they're desperate and someone who's giving because they've chosen to. As this becomes your new normal, as you build value, as you establish scarcity, as you make yourself into someone people need instead of someone who needs others, you're hitting a critical threshold. You're starting to move from the domain of tactics into the domain of systems. You're moving from doing things right occasionally to building a system where doing things right becomes automatic. This is the difference between a person who has success and a person who is a success. Most people can get a win here and there. They can have a productive month. They can execute well on a specific project. But then they revert. They coast. they get comfortable, they lose discipline. And gradually, they're back where they started. But the people who genuinely win, the people who don't just have success but become successful as an identity, they figured out how to convert discipline into systems. They figured out how to burn their retreat options so thoroughly that winning becomes automatic. They figured out how to surround themselves with pressure so constant that mediocrity is literally impossible. Here's the cold truth about human nature. Your willpower is limited. Your discipline is limited. Every single day, you have a certain amount of it, and it depletes as you use it. So if you're relying on willpower and discipline to be good, you're losing. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have weak moments. You're going to fall back into old patterns. But if you build systems, if you build structures, if you engineer your environment in such a way that the right behavior is the default behavior, then you're not fighting against yourself anymore. You're working with yourself. You're using systems to do the work that willpower used to have to do. The most successful people in the world understand this perfectly. They're not uniquely disciplined. They're just disciplined about designing their lives so that discipline isn't required for the most important things. They've automated success through systems. What does this look like? Let's say your system is about fitness. Most people rely on willpower. They wake up thinking, will I work out today? And half the time the answer is no. They don't have enough willpower. But someone with a system doesn't think about it. They wake up, they're in their gym clothes, they're at the gym at the same time every day. They've got a program already written. They've got a trainer waiting for them. They've got accountability, partners. The system does the work. Working out happens automatically because they've engineered it so it would be harder not to. The same principle applies to literally everything. Your work, your finances, your relationships, your mental health, your creative output. Everything gets better when you convert it from something that relies on willpower into something that's engineered into your system. Here's how you do it. First, you identify the non-negotiable behaviors that are going to move you toward your goal. Not everything. The few critical things that, if you did them consistently, everything else would follow. For most people, it's something like, I wake up at 5 in the morning. I exercise. I work for 4 hours on my most important project. I review my finances weekly. I meet with my accountability group every Sunday. Second, you build those behaviors into your environment in such a way that they're the path of least resistance. You don't go to bed at a flexible time so you can wake up at 5. You go to bed at 9 every night, no exceptions. You don't decide what to eat. You've pre-planned it so your only option is healthy. You don't decide whether to work on your important project. You've blocked the time on your calendar and told people you're unavailable. You don't decide whether to review your finances. You've set a calendar reminder and you've got the numbers displayed on your computer. Third, you burn your retreat options. You tell people about your system. You create accountability. You make it public so that not following through doesn't just disappoint you, it disappoints other people too. You've got friends checking in on you. You've got a coach holding you accountable. You've posted your goals online. You've committed in front of people. And that public commitment becomes part of your system. It's keeping you honest. Fourth, you review and you adjust. Systems aren't static. They need to be evaluated regularly. What's working? What's breaking down? Where are you getting lazy? You audit your system weekly. You ask yourself hard questions. You're honest about where you're slipping. And you adjust before small slip-ups become big ones. This is how you move from being someone who occasionally does things right to being someone for whom doing things right is literally built into the architecture of how they live. It's how you move from relying on willpower to relying on systems. And systems beat willpower every single time because systems work even on your worst days. But here's the final element of this, surrounding yourself with pressure. You need to be in an environment where slacking isn't just difficult, it's impossible. This is why environment selection is so critical. If you're surrounding yourself with comfortable people, you're going to become comfortable. If you're in a community of people who are pushing, who are competing, who are genuinely hungry, you're going to be pulled up, you're going to be forced to keep pace. This is also why stepping away from your old circle was so important. They were pulling you down, they were making comfort accessible, they were letting you coast. But now you need to actively choose an environment that's pulling you up, that's hard, that's scary, that's uncomfortable. But that's exactly why it works. The combination of a solid system and a high-pressure environment doesn't just make you successful, it makes you inevitably successful. It removes the option of failure. It makes winning not a choice, but a natural outcome of the structures you've built. Now we're at the point where everything changes. Everything up until now has been about building. It's been about developing yourself. It's been about creating the foundation. But this is where it gets real. This is where you have to make a choice. And the choice is whether you're actually going to commit to this or whether you're going to do what most people do. You're going to feel inspired for a few hours or a few days, and then you're going to go back to your old life. Because here's the truth. Everything we've talked about requires the death of the person you used to be. It requires a funeral. It requires a goodbye. The version of you that was comfortable with mediocrity, that was okay with being soft, that was willing to compromise, that made excuses, that blamed other people, that didn't take responsibility, that version of you needs to die. And most people can't do that. They're too attached to who they used to be. They're too afraid of who they might become. But that's not you. Or at least, not the you that's ready to transform. The you that's ready to read this far, that's ready to actually commit to building something real, knows that death is the price of rebirth. So here's what I want you to do. Today, not tomorrow, today. Sit down. Write a eulogy for the old you. I'm not being poetic or metaphorical, actually write it. Write about the person you've been. The weaknesses, the compromises, the failures, the comfortable lies you told yourself. Write about everything that version of you stood for, and then read it, feel it, acknowledge it, and then destroy it, burn it, throw it away. Because that person is dead. That person doesn't get to exist anymore. Then write out your plan for the new you, not some vague motivational statement. A concrete plan. What are you actually going to do tomorrow? What time are you waking up? What's your first action? What commitment are you making? What are you cutting out? Who are you calling? What boundary are you setting? What system are you building? Make it specific, make it real, make it something you can actually commit to. And then the hardest part, you're going to tell someone, not to ask permission, not for validation, but for accountability. You're going to tell someone you trust about this commitment. You're going to say it out loud, and now it's real. Now it's no longer just a thought, it's a statement, it's a commitment. And you're going to have to answer to it. Here's what's going to happen next. It's going to be hard, harder than you think. Are going to be moments when you want to go back, where you want to retreat to the comfort of who you used to be. That's normal. That's the old you fighting to survive. That's the weight of your past identity pulling you backward. You're going to have to be stronger than that pull. But here's what else is going to happen. You're going to get results. Not immediately, not in the way you expect, but you're going to start noticing things shift. People are going to respond to you differently, not because you're trying harder to please them, but because you're no longer seeking their approval. Doors are going to open that you didn't even know existed, not because luck changed, but because you're moving through the world differently now. You have a clarity of purpose. You have boundaries. You have power. And then something crucial happens. The new version of you is going to become your identity. It's not going to be something you're forcing anymore. It's not going to be something you have to think about. You're going to wake up one day and realize that the person you've become is just who you are. The discipline is automatic. The boundaries are natural. The systems are just how you operate. The hunger is just part of your baseline. You've killed the old you so thoroughly that there's no going back. This is the transformation. This is what we've been building toward. Not a motivational moment, not a temporary change. A permanent rewiring of who you are at your core. And I want to be clear about something. This isn't about becoming a villain. This isn't about hurting people or manipulating them for sport. Machiavelli's actual advice was far more nuanced than history gave him credit for. He understood that the most effective leaders weren't cruel for cruelty's sake. They were willing to be cruel when it was necessary, but mostly they were clear about their boundaries and relentless about their objectives. So, this transformation is about becoming dangerous in the right way. dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to people who want to hold you back, dangerous to anyone who thinks they can play you, but not dangerous to the people who are genuinely trying to work with you, who respect your boundaries, who are moving in the same direction as you. You're going to become someone people respect. Not fear negatively, but respect in the way you respect a mountain. It's not going to hurt you, but you know you shouldn't try to move it. You know you should work around it. You know it has its own integrity. That's what you're becoming. The people who matter, the real ones, the ones worth keeping, they're going to respect this shift in you. They're going to see that you've stopped being a pushover. They're going to understand that your time is valuable. They're going to appreciate that you're genuine about your commitments instead of being scattered across everything. And those relationships are going to deepen because they're now based on actual respect instead of dependency or need. And the ones who disappear, the ones who were only around because they could extract value from you, let them go. That's not a loss. That's a win. That's you clearing the field so that the real ones can step in. That's you making room for genuine connections instead of being drained by fake ones. So as you move into this new phase of your life, I want you to understand something. This isn't about luck changing. This isn't about the universe conspiring in your favor. This is about you changing. This is about you becoming the type of person who doesn't get played. This is about you becoming the type of person who plays the game instead of being played by it. Everything we've talked about, the cold initiation, the deliberate disruption, the emotional control, the starved weakness, the built scarcity, the automated systems, and now the death and rebirth of your identity. These aren't just concepts. These are the actual mechanics of power. These are how the people who genuinely win actually operate. And they're available to you right now, today. But here's the final truth. Knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is just knowledge. It only becomes powerful when you implement it, when you actually do something with it, when you make it real in your life. Right now you're reading words. Interesting words. Powerful words. But words on a screen don't change anything. Action changes things. Commitment changes things. Execution changes things. So here's your moment. This is where you prove something to yourself. This is where you stop being someone who reads about transformation and actually become someone who transforms. Drop a comment below. Tell me one specific thing you're committing to. Not vague, specific. I'm cutting out this person. I'm starting this project. I'm waking up at this time. I'm establishing this boundary. Say it aloud. Make it real. Make it public. And if this has shifted something inside you, if this has opened your eyes to a different way of operating, if you've realized that you've been playing small and you're ready to stop, like this video, subscribe to this channel, because we're just getting started. The transformation has begun, and there's a lot more ground to cover. The old you is dead. The new you is already here. All you have to do now is commit to actually becoming him. All you have to do is stop making excuses and start making moves. All you have to do is choose power over comfort. Choose power.